First impressions shape how we move through the world, but they are often guesses dressed up as certainty. A glance becomes a judgment. A moment becomes a label. People think they can read a life based on posture, clothing, or the way someone carries their grocery bags. The quiet neighbor becomes shy. The man who rarely smiles becomes unfriendly. The woman who keeps to herself becomes weak. These shortcuts feel efficient, but they blind us to the truth sitting right in front of us. Most of us never stop to ask why someone behaves the way they do or what experiences have shaped them. We assume the surface tells the full story because it is easy, and because it keeps us from examining our own biases. In neighborhoods, offices, and schools, this habit grows stronger because routine gives us confidence that we understand our surroundings. When you see the same faces in the hallway or parking lot, you think you know them. You notice a pattern, and your mind fills in the rest. A soft voice becomes a sign of insecurity. A calm demeanor is mistaken for submission. Someone who avoids attention is seen as someone who cannot handle pressure. It is human nature to make quick calls, but quick calls often miss the depth, grit, and history behind a person's choices. In the case of someone trained to face danger, silence is often a form of discipline rather than uncertainty. Stillness can be a shield that keeps chaos in check. People like that understand how to control a situation before it ever unfolds. Yet outsiders rarely see it. They only notice what sits at the surface. If a person like this chooses not to advertise their strength, others assume it does not exist. They forget that real capability rarely needs to talk. This gap between what we see and what is real becomes especially clear when fear or conflict enters a space. Those who have misunderstood someone often stand stunned when the truth shows itself. The moment a quiet person displays sharp instinct or trained reflexes, the false assumptions built over months collapse in seconds. People realize they were walking around with a story that had nothing to do with the person in front of them. The shock does not come from the act itself. It comes from the realization that they never really looked. Society puts a lot of weight on appearances. Someone slight in build is seen as fragile. Someone who dresses modestly is seen as easy to overpower. Someone who avoids confrontation is seen as someone who cannot win one. But strength is not always loud. Confidence is not always displayed. People with the highest level of skill often do everything they can to avoid unnecessary conflict. They know what real danger looks like. They know what real harm can do. They do not feel the need to prove anything until someone forces their hand. When strangers or aggressors rely on first impressions to choose their targets, they often pick the wrong person. They expect fear, hesitation, or compliance. They expect to dominate the moment. They expect their assumptions to hold, because their assumptions have never been challenged. But when the person they misread has lived through hardship, training, or battle, those expectations crumble. They learn that the quiet person in the corner may carry more strength than the loudest person in the room. It is not only physical strength that people misjudge. Mental strength hides just as well. A person who listens more than they speak often processes details others miss. A person who chooses their words carefully often understands conflict better than the person who jumps into it. A person who has learned discipline often stays composed long after others lose control. These forms of strength rarely show themselves until a moment demands them. The truth is that we never know who people are based on a simple glance. We never know what they have survived, what they have trained for, or what they can do when pushed to their limits. We walk past people every day who have lived through storms that would break most of us. Yet because they walk with calm steps, we assume their lives have been calm. Because they do not broadcast their story, we write one for them. When someone finally reveals their real capability, it does not appear as a surprise for them. It is simply a part of who they have always been. The surprise belongs to the people who never looked past the surface. They stand there, shocked, realizing how wrong they were, realizing how easily they mistook restraint for weakness, realizing their assumptions were never based on truth in the first place. Strength often hides in plain sight because real power rarely needs applause. It moves quietly through a room, carried by people who do not feel the need to brag or posture. These individuals do not announce their history, their skills, or their resilience. They simply live with it. They let others talk over them, underestimate them, and misunderstand them, not because they are weak, but because they have learned that truth does not need to fight for attention. They know what they are capable of, and that knowledge sits steady inside them. It shows in the way they breathe, the way they observe, the way they react only when the moment truly requires it. People overlook quiet strength because our instincts search for loud signals. When someone raises their voice, dominates a conversation, or demands attention, we label them as confident or powerful. When someone speaks softly or stays in the background, we assume they lack force. Yet the people who carry real depth tend to be the ones who do not waste energy displaying it. They conserve their power, save their skill, and act with intention. They understand that control is more valuable than noise. They understand that calm is not the absence of strength, but often the proof of it. In everyday life, you can find this kind of strength in places people rarely bother to look. It appears in the neighbor who rises before dawn to run miles alone, without seeking recognition. It appears in the coworker who handles pressure without raising their voice, choosing clarity and patience instead of panic. It appears in the parent who keeps the family steady during uncertainty, holding the weight without complaint. These people do not advertise their resilience. They carry it, and that is enough. Outsiders assume their lives are easy, or that they have never been tested, but the opposite is often true. The strongest individuals are those who have endured challenges quietly and learned how to stand firm without needing to prove anything. Sometimes, the greatest strength is hidden behind what others mistake for softness. Someone gentle can still be unbreakable. Someone reserved can still be prepared. People who listen more than they speak often gather more information than anyone realizes. They notice details. They read body language. They sense when something is off. They learn how to pick their battles because they understand that reacting to everything is a waste of effort. This level of awareness builds a foundation of strength that goes unnoticed until the moment it matters most. When conflict appears, the true measure of strength shifts from who talks the loudest to who holds the most control. Someone with real training or discipline often stays composed while everyone else loses their balance. Their breathing stays steady. Their thoughts stay clear. Their actions are precise. This calm does not come from inexperience. It comes from hours of practice, past hardships, and a mindset built around readiness. Yet because they do not flaunt this capability, people around them assume it does not exist. That is why those who rely on assumptions often misjudge the strongest person in the room. They look for intimidation. They look for showmanship. They look for physical displays. They miss the signs that sit beneath the surface. They miss the steadiness of posture, the intentional way someone moves, the discipline in their reactions. They confuse humility for weakness. They confuse silence for fear. They confuse composure for passivity. They do not understand that someone who knows exactly what they can do has no reason to prove it to anyone. There are countless moments when hidden strength becomes visible only because someone crosses a line. An aggressor pushes too far. A bully targets the wrong person. A stranger assumes they have power because the other appears small, quiet, or distracted. They expect an easy advantage. They expect compliance. They expect no resistance. Then everything shifts in an instant. The person they targeted acts with precision that comes from experience, not impulse. Their movements are efficient. Their voice is controlled. Their presence becomes unmistakable. The aggressor realizes too late that they chose someone who was never vulnerable in the first place. Hidden strength also shapes how people navigate their daily lives. Someone who has seen real danger knows how to avoid unnecessary conflict. Someone who has experienced real loss understands how to stay grounded. Someone who has endured real struggle learns how to protect their peace. These lessons build a type of strength that does not crumble under pressure. It stands solid even when everything else around it shakes. People rarely recognize this until a situation forces it into the open. Strength that hides in plain sight is not accidental. It is chosen. It is earned. It is practiced. It grows in people who trust their abilities more than their image. They do not need to be recognized. They do not need to be praised. They move through the world with quiet certainty, fully aware that those who underestimate them are the ones who understand strength the least. Violence strips away the surface of a person faster than anything else. It exposes instinct, training, fear, and intention all at once. When someone raises a hand to another, the moment becomes a spotlight that reveals who they truly are. The aggressor shows their impulse, their disregard for consequence, and their belief that power comes from control over someone else. The person on the receiving end shows either panic or clarity. They show whether they have been in this position before, whether they have learned how to respond, or whether the shock freezes them in place. In seconds, masks fall away. Violence does not allow time for performance. People spend their lives crafting how they want to be seen. They present confidence, humility, friendliness, indifference, or toughness depending on what the situation demands. But when a line is crossed and force enters the space, instinct overrides intention. The person who yells but never acts reveals their hollowness. The person who seems timid may reveal precision and focus. Someone who appears dominant in a calm room may fall apart under real pressure. Someone who blends into the background may become the only one who stays steady. These shifts are visible in the smallest gestures. The widening of an eye. The change in breathing. The way someone plants their feet without thinking. Violence also uncovers the cracks in people who rely on intimidation. Many who act tough in ordinary situations are not prepared for real resistance. They expect their size, their tone, or their reputation to carry them. They expect the other person to fold. When they face someone who does not shrink back, their confidence shatters. Their movements become clumsy. Their words lose weight. Their sense of control drains out of them as they realize they have misread the situation. They entered it thinking they held the advantage. They did not expect their target to be someone trained or experienced enough to neutralize them in seconds. The person who stays calm in the face of violence often surprises everyone. Calmness in that moment is not natural. It comes from exposure to stress, repetition, or disciplined training. It comes from understanding that panic wastes energy and clouds judgment. When someone can think clearly while being threatened, it reveals a level of strength that no one saw before. They assess the situation quickly. They notice the stance of the aggressor, the angle of the room, the distance between bodies. They measure risk and choose the exact response needed to end the danger. Those watching might think the reaction is instinct, but instinct is shaped by everything a person has lived through. Violence shows who acts with purpose and who acts without thought. The aggressor often lashes out because they believe they can. They rely on impulses that were never challenged. They believe the other person lacks the ability to stand up to them. They do not realize that striking someone with real training creates a situation they cannot control. When that person responds, their actions are sharp, efficient, and deliberate. They do not waste movement. They do not hesitate. They do not let fear dictate anything. The contrast between these two approaches becomes obvious. One is chaos. One is strategy. People witnessing such a moment often rethink everything they assumed about both individuals. They see the aggressor for what they are, someone who depends on surprise or dominance. They see the quiet individual for what they always were, capable, controlled, and prepared. It becomes clear that the loudest person in a conflict is not always the strongest. It becomes clear that someone who stays composed under threat carries a different kind of experience. They are not reacting from ego. They are responding from knowledge. Violence also reveals moral character. Some people strike because they believe they will get away with it. They rely on fear. They rely on silence. They rely on others not stepping in. When the situation turns against them, they often try to justify it or shift blame. Meanwhile, the person who acts in self-defense does so with restraint. They know exactly how much force is required. They know how to stop the threat without escalating beyond necessity. That restraint speaks louder than any explanation could. Moments like these spread through a community because they expose the truth that people miss in daily life. Strength that seemed invisible becomes undeniable. Weakness that was hidden behind bluster becomes obvious. People realize how easily they misinterpret others. They realize how quickly real pressure sorts the genuine from the counterfeit. They realize that the character revealed in a crisis is the character that was always there, waiting beneath the surface. Training turns fear into precision because repetition reshapes the way the mind responds to danger. Fear is natural. It spikes the heart, tightens the muscles, and scatters clear thought. Most people freeze when something threatens them, not because they are weak, but because their brain is trying to make sense of something it has not rehearsed. Training changes that. It replaces confusion with familiarity. It builds a pathway the mind can follow even when adrenaline hits hard. What once felt overwhelming becomes something recognizable. The body knows what to do without waiting for permission from panic. Someone who is trained for high-stress situations learns to trust their instincts because those instincts are no longer random. They are built from hours of practice, corrections, failures, and improvements. This creates a kind of quiet confidence. Not the loud kind that tries to impress others, but the grounded kind that comes from knowing your reactions will hold steady when things go off balance. The mind switches from fear to calculation. Instead of thinking about what could go wrong, the person starts identifying the next step, the safest angle, the fastest solution. Even breathing becomes disciplined. Controlled breaths keep vision sharp and movement stable. Training also builds precision through muscle memory. Skills repeated hundreds or thousands of times stop feeling like tasks and start feeling like reflexes. A trained person can block, step, or redirect without hesitating. Their movements are not random flails or emotional swings. Everything they do has purpose behind it. They do not waste energy. They do not let panic hijack their decisions. This efficiency does not come from boldness. It comes from the body learning the correct response so well that it becomes second nature. When pressure rises, that stored ability takes over. There is also a mental precision that training sharpens. A person learns to observe details others miss. They become aware of spacing, timing, balance, posture, and intent. They notice when someone shifts their weight. They notice when a voice changes tone. They notice the way tension builds in a room. This awareness creates a map in their mind, one that grows more accurate with experience. In a moment of conflict, they can assess the situation faster than someone untrained can process their own fear. They know what danger feels like before it fully arrives, and they know how to respond before most people even understand what is happening. Training teaches discipline not only in action but in restraint. Knowing how to fight carries an understanding of when not to. Many people assume skill breeds aggression, but real training does the opposite. It builds responsibility. It teaches that true strength lies not in proving ability, but in controlling it. That control becomes especially clear in tense moments. While others react from emotion, the trained individual reacts from judgment. They know that a calm, measured response can diffuse a situation faster than an explosive one. They know that escalation wastes time and puts people at risk. Precision does not only mean accuracy in movement. It means accuracy in decision-making. Fear never disappears completely, even for those with the highest level of training. What changes is the relationship to it. Instead of fear taking over, it becomes a signal that sharpens focus. It becomes a cue to apply everything learned. The body prepares without shaking. The mind clears instead of clouding. Training teaches a person how to function while scared. It teaches that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act correctly in spite of it. This shift transforms unpredictable chaos into something manageable. People who observe someone trained in a stressful moment often misunderstand what they are seeing. They assume the calmness means the person does not feel fear. They assume the precision comes naturally. They assume the confidence is effortless. They do not realize that every smooth movement is built on countless imperfect ones. They do not realize that the clarity displayed in the moment was created through struggle, sweat, and repeated failure behind closed doors. Training is the quiet work that no one sees, yet it becomes visible the moment everything depends on it. When someone with real training is pushed to act, the difference becomes unmistakable. Their reactions are faster, but not rushed. Their choices are decisive, but not reckless. Their actions are controlled, but never hesitant. They can do more in a single second than an untrained person can do in 5, not because they are fearless, but because they know exactly what fear tries to take away and how to counter it. Precision becomes their language. Focus becomes their anchor. Training becomes the foundation that turns a frightening moment into a problem they know how to solve. Choices carry consequences because every decision, big or small, sets something in motion. People often imagine that only dramatic choices define outcomes, but the quieter ones shape just as much. The choice to step forward or back. The choice to speak up or stay silent. The choice to escalate or walk away. All of these decisions create ripples that grow into outcomes people rarely anticipate. Someone who lashes out in a moment of anger often believes the moment will remain small, that the reaction will fade, that the impact will be forgotten. But actions have a way of sticking, especially when the choice comes from impulse instead of thought. When someone chooses violence, they reveal more than anger. They reveal a disregard for what follows. They assume their target will fold, that witnesses will stay quiet, that the situation will remain in their control. This assumption blinds them to the reality that the world does not always respond the way they expect. One decision to swing, shove, or strike can flip a situation instantly. They may believe they are choosing dominance, but what they are actually choosing is a chain of events that can turn against them with no warning. A single careless action can place them in direct conflict with someone far more capable than they realized. On the other side, the person facing the aggression must make choices just as quickly. Fear, instinct, and training collide as they decide how to respond. Do they freeze, comply, defend, redirect, or escape? In that split second, their choice defines how the entire moment unfolds. A trained individual understands this well. They know that reacting with chaos only creates more danger. They choose control over emotion. They choose precision over panic. This decision is not instinct alone. It is a choice made through experience, discipline, and awareness. They know that their reaction carries weight, so they aim to manage the threat while minimizing harm. People often forget that in conflict, the choice to stay calm is just as deliberate as the choice to explode. Calmness is not passivity. It is a strategic decision rooted in clarity. It keeps the mind open to possibilities and prevents mistakes that irreversible consequences. Someone who chooses calmness in the face of aggression shows a level of strength the aggressor did not expect. That shift in power happens the moment one person's choices begin to reflect control while the other spirals deeper into impulse. Consequences also show up in the way people learn from their choices, or fail to. Someone who gets away with aggression once often believes they can do it again. They mistake luck or others' silence for validation. They believe their behavior carries no cost. But every time they repeat the choice to intimidate or harm, they move closer to someone who will not tolerate it. They do not realize that the lack of resistance in earlier moments created a false sense of security. When they finally choose to target someone who is prepared, their belief in easy dominance collapses. A trained individual makes different choices long before conflict ever reaches a flashpoint. They avoid unnecessary confrontation. They analyze their surroundings. They watch for exits, for tension, for shifts in energy. These habits form because they know how quickly choices shape outcomes. They know that one wrong move can escalate a situation from manageable to dangerous. Their choices reflect a commitment to responsibility, not fear. They understand that strength should never be used carelessly. The consequence of misuse is not only harm to others, but harm to themselves. That awareness becomes a guiding force in everything they do. In community settings, people witness these consequences firsthand. They see how one reckless decision can spark panic or outrage. They see how one calm, well-chosen response can bring order back into the space. They also see how quickly reputations shift. The aggressor who once seemed intimidating becomes someone people avoid or mistrust. The quiet person who acted with discipline becomes someone others respect, even if they do not know the full story. Choices build these reputations, not words. People sometimes believe they can control the outcome of their actions, but consequences are not obedient. They do not bend to intention. They follow the path shaped by reality, not by what someone hoped would happen. An aggressor might intend to scare someone, but instead they reveal their own lack of control. A trained person might intend only to defend themselves, but witnesses may walk away with a permanent understanding of their capability. These outcomes form from the choices made in the moment, choices made too quickly to be polished. Every decision in a moment of conflict is a fork in the road. One path leads to escalation, one to resolution, one to regret, one to clarity. The person who understands this chooses carefully, even under pressure. The person who ignores it learns too late that choices always echo longer than expected. Respect is not optional because every interaction carries weight. People move through the world with their own histories, strengths, limits, and boundaries, and pretending those things do not exist leads to conflict. Respect is the acknowledgement that others deserve space, dignity, and safety. It is not about agreeing with someone. It is not about liking them. It is about recognizing that they have the same right to exist, move, and breathe without fear. When respect breaks, everything that follows becomes unpredictable. Tension grows. Tempers flare. Lines get crossed. What starts as a simple disagreement can turn into something far more serious when respect is removed from the equation. Disrespect often begins quietly. Someone talks over another person. Someone ignores a boundary. Someone raises their voice because they think it gives them more authority. These early signs get dismissed as personality quirks or temporary moods, but they are seeds. Left unchecked, they grow into entitlement. The person begins to believe they can treat others however they want. They push limits. They test reactions. They assume no consequences will come their way. When someone like this decides to use force, they are acting from a long pattern of believing their wants outweigh someone else's rights. The act of striking another person is the clearest form of disrespect. It says that the aggressor sees the other as lesser, as someone without power or value. They believe their anger matters more than another person's safety. They believe they can take what they want without facing any challenge. But violence done out of disrespect often lands the aggressor in a reality they did not prepare for. When the person they target is trained, disciplined, or simply unwilling to be treated as an object, the balance shifts fast. Everything the aggressor assumed about control disappears. Respect also applies to understanding that you never truly know someone's background or capability. A calm face does not reveal experience. A quiet voice does not reveal strength. A small frame does not reveal power. People who skip respect and jump straight to judgment often learn the hard way that their assumptions do not match reality. They mistake silence for weakness. They mistake politeness for fear. They mistake humility for submission. When they finally push too far, they meet a version of the person they never imagined existed. Respect is not optional because it is the first step in preventing unnecessary conflict. When people show respect, they create space for clarity instead of confrontation. They give others room to breathe, explain, adjust, or walk away. Respect reduces friction. It makes situations manageable. A trained individual, especially someone with experience in high-stress environments, understands this deeply. They know the value of de-escalation. They know that avoiding a fight is always better than winning one. They know that real strength shows in restraint, not intimidation. Their respect is not weakness. It is strategy. It keeps people safe, including themselves. In contrast, those who operate without respect often misinterpret restraint. They think the person who avoids conflict is scared. They think the person who stays calm is an easy target. They think the person who offers a polite warning is bluffing. These misunderstandings come from living in a mindset where power equals dominance, not discipline. When the restrained person finally needs to act, their capability exposes how flawed that mindset is. The aggressor realizes too late that the respect they failed to show could have protected them from the very consequences they now face. Respect also shapes community dynamics. A neighborhood, workplace, or family thrives when people treat each other with basic decency. Safety grows from it. Trust grows from it. Communication becomes smoother. Problems stay small because everyone understands that boundaries matter. The absence of respect has the opposite effect. People feel unsafe. Rumors spread. Conflicts escalate faster. Every interaction becomes heavier because no one knows when someone might cross a line. In environments like that, one moment of disrespect can ignite a fire that burns far longer than anyone expected. When someone witnesses a trained individual responding to disrespect, especially one who has been pushed into defending themselves, the lesson spreads quickly. People begin to understand that the quietest person might be the most capable. They see that respect is not just politeness but protection. It protects the person who gives it by keeping them out of trouble. It protects the person who receives it by ensuring their boundaries are not violated. It protects the environment around them by preventing unnecessary chaos. At the heart of it, respect is about recognizing humanity. It is about understanding that every person carries a story you cannot see. It is about acting in a way that does not assume superiority. It is about acknowledging that crossing certain lines can trigger consequences you never meant to face. When someone disregards respect, they create a situation they cannot predict or control. When someone upholds it, they keep danger at a distance, even when they never speak a word.